Chapter 19, The Energy Body. Nelita led me to the top of the bluff from where I had seen the ruins. She said it was a place the ancient sorcerers called a twin power spot. Why do they call it a power spot? I asked, stopping to catch my breath. I looked back across the valley. I could see the trail winding along the red-rimmed canyon. I was surprised at how much distance we had covered in a short time. The ancient sorcerers have imbued the rocks and earth with their intent, Nelita said. The columns and the point on the bluff from where you saw the ruins form an energetic arch that allowed your energy body to be pulled away from its moorings. Returning to that place will seal your energy body and fill it with vitality. However, I wouldn't recommend spending the night there. Why is that? Because the somber mood of the ancient sorcerers would derail you from your purpose, Nelita said. You are somber enough as it is. You don't need to be pushed over the brink. I laughed nervously. I was standing dangerously close to the edge where one false step could lead to a sharp drop of hundreds of feet. I saw ominous boulders that seemed to have been lodged below by a torrential flood. Now a stream meandered in an uneven course. It was hard to believe that a river had cut so deeply into the mountainside. Now the stream appeared to be trapped down there with no hope of escape. Nelita pointed to a flat mesa across the ravine and said, "That is the place over there." "It frightens me to go back there," I told Nelita, moving away from the edge. Somehow, that place didn't seem friendly to me. Nelita gave me a sideways glance. What makes you think that places of power have to be friendly, especially the twin power spots of the ancient sorcerers? All that is needed for a place to be useful is that there is a particular intent flowing from the earth. We continued to make our way to the area from where I had seen the ruins. My thighs were burning. I had to stop every 15 steps or so, for the climb was decidedly uphill. Nelita had given me a bottle of Penefiel water which she told me to sip slowly. I had gotten to the last drop and was about to toss the bottle away when she stopped me with a strong grasp on my arm. "You must act impeccably," she said. "That means leaving nothing behind." I tied the empty bottle to a belt loop of my jeans and we continued walking. When we got to the flat area, Nelita took a series of deep breaths and asked me if I noticed anything particular about the place. I inhaled a few times, then told her that the air seemed to be thinner, clearer and more transparent. I was no longer tired. "You are right," Nelita said. "The air here is light, not heavy like the air you are accustomed to breathing. This air has been purified through the sorcerer's intent so that only the essence of vitality remains." I wasn't prepared to go as far as attributing my renewed well-being to the essence of vitality, but breathing the air did seem to energize me. Nelita urged me to fill my lungs with the life-giving charge. As I breathed, she disclosed that the ancient sorcerers used to practice their dreaming here and that they dwelt in the caves that dotted the mountainside. Why did they pick this place in particular as their power spot? I asked. We sat down on a flat rock that had a slight depression in it, as if the rock had been carved out for sitting. Although, I couldn't help noticing that whoever had sat there before had larger buttocks. "There are certain natural cracks in the crust of the earth through which one can slip," Nelita said. The ancient seers were experts at finding these cracks and at stepping through them. They handed down this knowledge from generation to generation. We are sitting on one such crack now. I jumped up. Nelita laughed and said it was not a geological crack or fault line, but an opening in the Earth's energy crust. "Were the sorcerers that lived here hermits?" I asked, sitting down again. "Many of them were," she admitted. "Just as are many of the modern sorcerers that use these caves today, but because they are recluses, not because they live alone or are holy men, but because they have succeeded in detaching themselves from human concerns." Why is that? Are sorcerers misanthropic? Nelita shook her head, brought her knees to her chest and wrapped her arms around her calves. I copied her posture. Immediately, I felt a warm buzzing sensation in my chest and abdomen, which heated me up in spite of the wind that blew around us. Sorcerers are not misanthropic, she said with a glint. We enjoy ourselves immensely in the company of others. Our teacher, the Nawal Julian, often entertained his guests with elaborate tableaux and hilarious theatrical presentations. Yet in the midst of this revelry, he managed to remain detached from people. Sorcerers, even though they may appear to be ordinary men and women, are not like other people at all. What makes them different? Living on their place of power, learning from the earth, and seeing energy directly makes them regard everything as fluid and temporary. Through the recapitulation, a sorcerer breaks his ties with the world and with the self. As he strategically cuts himself off from extraneous disturbances, he simplifies his life and his desires. He seals himself off from human concerns, and very deliberately casts and secures a mysterious line. Is it an energy line? I asked. Yes, but not to the earth or to people. It is a line linking him directing to intent. When his change is complete, he can return to the world of people and yet remain apart from them. No matter where he is, alone or in the company of others, his only bond is to intent, and only the spirit can lay claim on him. I felt a sudden shiver at the finality and the loneliness such a bond entailed. Let's build a fire, Nalita suggested as if sensing my mood. I helped her gather dry wood and arrange it in a pile. She asked me for some matches and struck one to a branch. The fire made a crackling sound that sent sparks flying upward. Soon a warm glow filled the clearing. I told her that Don Juan had said that the ancient sorcerers knew how to foretell the future from the distribution of embers as the fire had burned out. The old sorcerers knew a great deal about a great many things, Nalita said as she tossed another branch onto the flames. They could examine the remains of the burnt branches and foretell the future. How could anyone tell the future from bits of charred wood? I wanted to know. Nalita said that the sorcerers who knew the technique could not only predict events to come, but could examine the current state of affairs in order to avoid calamities or unwanted occurrences. A person with the facility looks at the arrangement of the dying embers and branches, and the powers of fire and would tell him what he wants to know. Do you know how to do this? Nalita nodded. It has to do with how the branches lie after the fire has gone out and the pattern the dying sparks make that gives the clue. For example, if the fire goes out suddenly and 5 branches remain glowing, then something sudden or on a grandiose scale will occur. How do you know that? I asked, staring at the fire. Because all of the 5 directions are lit up at once, she replied. If, on the other hand, the fire burns down slowly, and there are many branches still left kindled, making a circular pattern, then the turn of events will be gradual and for the better. Nalita added that the direction the charred branches are pointing is also an indication. A large branch pointing north signifies great upheaval or activity, the east is the direction of dawn and wisdom, the south of warmth and nurturing, and the west of introspection and mystery. Now, if a branch is pointing straight up, or if a gust of wind suddenly blows the fire out, you're in deep trouble. Why is that? Intent is indicating the direction of the zenith, and that always means giant movement. I still don't see what a fire has to do with events that affect human beings. Our bodies, the elements, the energy of fire, the 4 compass points all merge into one, Nalita explained. That is how we can examine the arrangement of the charred wood and see how it relates to our lives. She said it was a mistake to regard ourselves as separate from the elements, for the same forces that move the fire rule our energy bodies. The reason we think ourselves as separate from everything else, Nalita explained, is precisely because we are thinking. It is thought that separates us from the totality and makes us forget our common origin. She drew closer to the fire and told me to extend my hands near the flames. You can pull the energy of the fire into your body through your palms, she suggested. Allow the heat to merge with your body to warm you. I held out my palms and felt the warmth of the fire flow into my hands, until I was so hot I began to perspire. I no longer needed my poncho and took it off. We are all made up of light, Nelita continued. Light activates our energy body, and even though we have a human form, to a sorcerer who sees, we are essentially filaments of light. Nelita called our human side our ape's heritage, adding that our animal heritage makes us act in an unruly fashion. We have another side that is totally hidden. How do you know this other side exists if it's completely hidden? I wanted to know. Sorcerers see it, and we all know it is there, she assured me. But near as it is, for it is our very selves, it always remains out of reach. As long as we cling to our ape form, we can never tap that other part, the part that sorcerers call the energy body or double. I sighed and looked at the glowing embers. We all long for something just out of reach, Nelita said, sensing my mood. We see possibilities in our dreams, we wish to be more energetic, but we always try to find fulfillment in the things of the world. Hence, we are doomed to fail. Why is that? Because the part that we are looking for to make us complete is not in the world, she said. That part is the energy body. It belongs to the realm of pure energy. To tap it, we must turn our eyes elsewhere. Nelita said that only the recapitulation enables us to see that the physical and intellectual holdings that we have so assiduously amassed are a mirage in front of the eyes. Yet we cling to them as if our very survival depended on it, even though it is only an illusory agreement based on our sharing of a common perceptual framework. Why is the recapitulation so important? I asked. The recapitulation allows you to build an energy platform from which you can assess the concerns and experiences that you call your life. In other words, the recapitulation allows you the opportunity to come into contact with the other. What is the other like? Nelita looked at me through the glow of the dying embers. It is the light that moves us before it has been molded by interpretations. There is nothing worse than for our energy to be limited by the circumstances of our life. From infancy, we become shaped and contorted by labels, until we think our personal self is all there is, and we completely lose sight of our energy being or double. Can you give me a concrete example? I asked, stretching my legs that were beginning to cramp from sitting on hard granite. For example, take not having possessions, she said. Aren't things important? I asked. You see so much poverty in the world. Who can blame people for wanting a better way of life? Many of the sorcerers in our lineage experienced poverty, yet they themselves were not destitute. I argued that a child who knows only poverty has no defenses. Its entire world becomes meager and poor. Nelita nodded. Worse yet, her spirit becomes petty, greedy and twisted, she said, looking straight at me. Material blight brought on by life's circumstances is nothing compared to poorness of the spirit. Whereas the poor or hungry body can be healed with proper nourishment, there is no cure for a meager spirit. It has only misery and a lack of fulfillment awaiting it. I wanted to know if it was possible to avoid poorness of the spirit if one was born into a situation of material blight. If you have enough energy, you can't be touched by anything, Nelita assured me, even if you are surrounded by poor and petty people. Nelita said that to a sorcerer who sees, all things are equal because they are energy. Therefore, a sorcerer living in a shack considers himself wealthy, while an ordinary person living in the city may regard himself poor even though he has a house full of furniture and a closet full of clothes. Who do you think is poorer? Nelita asked, the sorcerer in the mountains or the person in the city? I told her that even though he has more, the person in the city was poorer, thinking that that was what she wanted to hear. Nelita shook her head. As long as a person has not detached his energy body from the idea of poverty or riches, as long as he has not recapitulated his life, he is poor of spirit, she said. Something she said about being detached from riches called forth a childhood incident. Sometimes, for no apparent reason, my father would bring home a box of French pastries. My brothers and I would stand around the table and argue over who would get which piece, for there was only one per person. I wanted to eat all of them or at least more than one, but I had to wait until it was my turn to choose, for, invariably, age took precedent. I would be last and all the good creamy pastries had already been selected by my brothers, father and mother. I would be left with the fruit tart, or an egg custard when I would kill for the cream puff or chocolate eclair my brothers were eating. Why did you fret so? Nelita asked when I told her the story. Didn't you know that pastries are all the same? It didn't matter which one you picked or what was left in the box. I argued that they were not all the same at all. Some had chocolate icing, others had vanilla cream, and the Napoleon that my father always chose had a flaky crust, but Nelita insisted that I was being arbitrary in saying that one was intrinsically more desirable than the other. They are all made with flour, sugar, eggs and milk, she said. Only their appearance varies. Why wring your insides for a slight variation in outer appearance? I had never thought of it that way. Looked at from a detached perspective, they all had been pretty much the same. What made one or another better was my brothers insisting that their pastry was better than mine. To covet one and turn my nose up on another was being arbitrary and petty. You should have let your brothers rave all they wanted, and still enjoy the one you had, she said. You could have practiced being indifferent to their mesmeric commands. All I knew was I hated them for taking the best pieces, I said, but now I see that you are right. Flour, milk and sugar are the same no matter what shape you put them in. Only when a person has found that common ground in which all things are equal, is he truly free, Nelita said. For then he has liberated himself from the circumstances of life that place limits on his possibilities. Nelita stood up and walked to the edge of the clearing. She looked down at the bottom of the ravine. I had the sense that the stream was imprisoned by the massive canyon walls. Our energy body is like that stream, she said, pointing down. The sides of the canyon are the circumstances of our lives that imprison us. Even when we look up, all we see are our prison walls. Our only hope for freedom is to flow steadily onward with an unbending intent. We have to have courage and optimism, especially when we begin recapitulating our lives, Nelita continued. We must know that the walls around us are illusory, they cannot mold us forever, they cannot detain us on our journey. Like the stream, our energy must flow onward and not avoid any nook or cranny, but not linger either lest we never reach our final destination. What is that? I asked. The sea, Nelita said. The vast eternal sea. Nelita left me alone on the hilltop to regroup my energy. She had said she was going to do some sorcery not doings in one of the nearby caves. I wanted desperately to go with her, but she insisted I sit quietly and let the power of the place energize me. To while away the time, I gazed at a stagnant pool, left over from a recent rain. In it I could see reflected the nearby boulders and a scraggly toyon tree. For a while, I watched the rocks shimmering in the green-black liquid. A blade of sunlight piercing the branches made the water ripple. I gazed at the pool for a long time. The movement in it seemed to be mesmerizing me and bearing a silent message. I looked up at the trees and rocks from where the sun was shining. They were the same trees and rocks I had seen reflected in the pool of water, and yet they were not. There was another world, and the reflection of things was its entrance. What we call the real world was made up of substances, things like trees and rocks and water that we could name, yet they were as illusory as the images in the pool of water. I stood up and began to practice some sorcery passes. I made vertical figure eights in the air with my palm. I extended my arms and squeezed my shoulder blades to strengthen my cloak of confidence. I picked up the energy spark from the earth with my fingertips and brought them to my forehead. When I had finished moving, I began to search the underbrush for a plant Nelita had asked me to gather. When I had a bundle full, I found Nelita sitting on a rock as if she had waiting for me to pass that way. Did you find the herb I asked you to look for? She asked. I told her I had some in my knapsack. It was extremely foul-smelling and would no doubt stink up the bag for weeks to come. What are you going to do with the plants? I asked. I'm going to make a paste to rub on the infected bites on your legs, she said. An added advantage is that it will keep the body hair from growing back, so you won't have to shave your legs. I wonder how she knew I had scabs and cuts from continually shaving them with dull razor blades I was too lazy or cheap to replace. As Nelita took the herbs, I told her about the realization I had had with the sun's reflections in the puddle of water. She shrugged, unimpressed. When the mind and body are at ease, a tiny crack is created and an insight can slip through, she said. That's why I keep urging you to be silent and let the voice of the spirit tell you what's what. Otherwise you will never grasp anything. She handed me a strip of dried meat, similar to the meat that Don Juan had given me. I wondered if it came from the same batch of power meat. I ate with gusto. Walking had made me hungry. Nelita leaned back against a tree trunk and said she wanted to tell me more about the voice of seeing, which was another way of talking about the voice of the spirit. She agreed that the insight I had had at the pool of water was a start, but there was much more to it. What do you think causes someone lift her head and look at the sun? Nelita asked, gazing at me intently. When all her life she only looked at her reflection in a stagnant pool of water? What makes a person suddenly turn in the direction of the other? I ventured a guess. Perhaps the person got bored looking at his own reflection, I said, using the masculine gender to counter her use of the feminine. But the person doesn't know that what she sees are only reflections? Nelita argued. She thinks that this is all there is to the world. Might he have turned his eyes by chance or by luck? I asked. Could be, she agreed. But there is yet another possibility. She waited for me to make another suggestion. Maybe the sun was so bright, it pulled the person's eyes toward it? I offered. Nelita nodded, her eyes began to sparkle. You're right, she said. The sun pulled her eyes with its brilliance. Nelita explained that the sun, in this case, was what sorcerers call intent. When one has polished one's link to intent, the power of intent is strong enough to pull one's eyes away from self-reflection. Before this can occur, the body and mind must be purified through the recapitulation and the sorcery passes. By practicing the sorcery passes and by cleaning the lines of the past using the sweeping breath, by becoming one with your activities, whether it is studying, sewing, drawing, or anything else you might do, you transform yourself. Provided, of course, that you do these things with the sorcerer's purpose. What is the sorcerer's purpose? To evolve, Nelita said. To wake up intent so that one can see the world through lucid eyes. The eyes of the ordinary person are clouded with thoughts, his feelings are twisted with concerns. You must first clear a path to intent before it can begin to pull you. Then you can gradually tap the energy body, and when it is as bright as the sun, you let go of the self and allow intent to move you. How does it move you? I asked. With energy, my dear. With energy. Once you abandon the reasoning mind that makes everything factual, intent pulls you to the side of sheer energy. Nelita said that it takes a great deal of recapitulating to let go of one's judgments, opinions, and our incessant need for control. But once one makes the crossing, it is as if one had always understood, only before, one hadn't the power to see that nothing ever existed in any other way. Concentrate on intending a bridge to the energy body, Nelita advised. Do the sorcery passes, then use their energy and intent to cross over to the other side in full awareness. Only then can you escape the fate that awaits you as a human being. What fate awaits me? I asked with a shiver. I feared that she had seen something in the charred embers of the fire and knew something I didn't. The fate of your parents, naturally. I thought about my parents. My mother had died of cancer after a long bout of illness. My father died of cirrhosis of the liver after months of excruciating pain. I froze at the thought of what fate had in store for me if I failed to make the crossing. Prolonged illness and death are all you have to look forward to, Nelita said, reading my thoughts. And it doesn't matter if one dies rich or poor, young or old, peacefully or slowly from some hideous disease. What matters is that people die unawares, consequently they all go to the same place. I asked Nelita if there was some sort of Hades where everyone who was not aware went when they died. Nelita laughed and said that unless we merge with our energy bodies, the hell is right here on this earth. But don't you need a teacher to help you to change and get to your energy body? I asked. I know when I go back to Los Angeles, you won't be there, and I'll be at a loss as to what to do. We don't need teachers, Nelita assured me. Anyone can make the crossing. All we have to do is to let go of our holdings. Intend it, fulfill the sorcerer's bidding, but who wants to recapitulate their lives and let go of herself? Nelita was talking about me again. I wanted to defend myself and argue that I had recapitulated my tail off, but I knew it would be pointless. There were enormous reservoirs left that I hadn't even touched. There is really not much more to say on the subject, Nelita said. In fact, I am talking to you only to convince your reason that its empty assertions and clinging will not lead to freedom. To hold on to the self is a waste of energy. You are better off using this energy to forge the double so that intent can pull it to freedom. Nelita reiterated that all one needs to do is to acquiesce and to abandon the willful need to control that characterizes our daily life. Whenever you practice the sorcery passes, focus on the abdomen and let the energy flow unimpeded. Also, never feel important or that you have accomplished something. Why is that? I asked. Only when one is not doing and not being can intent take hold, Nelita said. How can one do something and not do it at the same time? That has always been difficult for me to grasp. You let go and allow the energy to act through you, regardless of what you do. Sink down and become quiet. Consider this as your new sorcery task, to become quiet and deep. Nelita took a thermos from a knapsack and poured a cup of water for me to drink. Deftly she screwed the top back and returned the thermos to her bag. Developing the energy body is another sorcery task that you must fulfill, she said, taking a sip of water. Some people are more adept at this than others, but everyone begins at the same place, with a strong attachment to the self. How does one break this attachment? One simply decides one has had enough of indulging and pampering the child in us, and one starts to live a disciplined life. Everything we have shown you are means to make it easier for you to give up your obsessive self-concern. I nodded. Something in me was agreeing with what Nelita was saying, but some other part of me still didn't want to let go of being in control. The thought that some outside force would rule me was antithetical to my idea of independence. I felt that unless I asserted myself, I would always be the last one to choose the pastry and would have to take what was left. Don't be afraid to exert yourself. Freedom must be earned, Nelita said. Seize your quarter centimeter of chance and give it your best effort, but not to enhance your ego. Sensing my reluctance to change, Nelita continued. A part of you wants to give up, while the other part clings. Consequently, there is conflict, but once the decision is made, there is no more struggle, only purpose, delight, and acquiescing. Nelita stood up, saying she wanted to practice some sorcery passes to help unify the body and mind and release the energy that was trapped in various body centers. She said that through our habit of holding everything in, energy stagnates. A sorcerer lets go of everything and does not carry anything inside him that would block the flow of energy. The first area that needs to be released is the sexual center, Nelita said. Why? Because it is the lowest. No, because of the emphasis placed upon it by our puritanical culture, she corrected me. This rigidity expresses itself in emotional needs for love and our excessive attention placed on courtship and mating. Courtship and mating are so dominant that they leave no energy for anything else. Releasing and purifying the energy trapped in the sexual centers vitalizes the entire body, including the centers located outside the luminous cocoon itself. When I asked her what she was talking about, she repeated that the sorcery passes increase one's energy, or can be done as a means of invoking intent. They were doors to not being, as well as a means of disrupting the habits the body has built up through a lifetime of doing. Sorcery passes wake up the energy body, Narrated said. They are designed to release trapped energy, but they must never be thought of as mere exercises, or even as martial arts, yoga, or Tai Chi. Why is that? Their intent is different. It was set by sorcerers of ancient times. Did they make them up? No, they were not simply made up. These passes come down in our lineage through dreaming or from the spirit itself. When you have enough energy, you too may be able to pull sorcery passes directly from the spirit. The voice of the seeing will tell you all you need to know about sorcery passes. Narrated clarified that whatever came to the sorcerers at any moment was designed for a given purpose. Sorcerers, especially stalkers, are extremely flexible. They follow the design of the spirit. All we do is empty ourselves and allow intent to move us. That is why no two sorcery passes are alike. And one never knows which pass one should do until the moment of doing it. This is the sense in which we practice them today. We do them to lead us to awareness and freedom. Used properly, their intent may help one escape in a flurry of light.